Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ben Kinney. I'm publisher of Business North Carolina, and welcome to our virtual North Carolina economic forecast. We're really fortunate to have a great panel of experts here to talk a little bit about what we can expect for our economy and business in the state in 2022. I'd like to introduce our great panel here first. And they include Dr. Mark Steckbeck. He is the Lundy Chair of Free Enterprise and Associate Professor of Economics at Campbell University. Chris Chung's with us. He's President and CEO of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Adam Currie's here. He is the Chief Banking Officer for First Bank. Byron Hicks is the State Director for the Small Business and Technology Development Center. Stephen Lawler is the President and CEO of the North Carolina Healthcare Association. Tony Copeland is the Senior Economic Development and Corporate Strategist for law firm Brooks Pierce and also our former Secretary of Commerce. Andy Fusco is the Vice President for Member Services and Corporate Planning for Electricities. Doug Edgeton is the President and CEO for the North Carolina Biotech Center. And of course, Thomas Stith is the President of the North Carolina Community College System. Welcome, you guys. Thanks for making this. Really appreciate it. Hey, just to let everybody know, we were supposed to have an in-person event at this time, but unfortunately, because of our old friend COVID, we had to go virtual. It's been a crazy kickoff to the year, and so we are doing what every business does here is pivot, and so we've done quite a bit of that. But one of the things I think we know after 2 years of this mess is that we can actually adapt pretty quickly to it and still keep moving forward, which is very important in this day and age, and something I think we in the state have done a really good job. So how I'd like to kick this off is, if it's possible, Mark, if you could give us an overview, kind of a broad overview of everything in terms of the economy. Tell us a little bit about how 2021 ended. And also, what 2022? What's it looking like from your viewpoint, sir? Okay.
As we mentioned last year at this time, we talked about the supply chain issues, and those were a looming problem, and certainly they were. If you'll remember, I talked about it's a very complex system when you're dealing with literally millions, tens of millions of products coming together, people all over the world. And it's not something that somebody can come in and basically try to control. One of the examples I gave is just pairing entertainers with venues. And I bring that up because my wife and I went to see a comic in December at Maimondi Center, who she made fun of the fact that she is in a concert hall where an orchestra plays, but that's the kind of thing that's happening with just that venue. Now what you have is companies can't get the products they need. We've seen this with automobiles, although automobile production has gone up a little bit. It dropped again in December, but things like that, production, computers, other technology has been affected by this. And so we're still going to be dealing with that through 2022. Matter of fact, I anticipate we'll be dealing with that 2023. Companies are really concerned about what's going on. The producer price index was up almost 19% year over year. And these things are having an impact on production prices we're going to talk about next. And so we're still going to be dealing with supply chain issues throughout this year. Second thing we have to worry about is inflation. Again, it increased 6.8% in November. The second quarter and the parts of November, in November, 6.8% over a year. The personal consumption expenditure index is 4.7% increase in November, and that's the highest since 1989. So we're seeing a lot of inflation. It's driven by three basic things. One is a supply chain issue. If they're not able to get the products, you're seeing an increase in demand without an increase in supply, or a comparable increase in supply. Second thing is government spending. We've seen these fiscal transfer packages, the spending increase significantly now with the Build Back Better program looming still. There's a lot of caution about that spending because that could increase inflation even more. And the third thing is, well, really four things. The third thing is Fed policy. The Federal Reserve assets increased from about $7 trillion to about $8.6 trillion just in the last year and a half. And so that's a lot of liquidity out there that's got to be reined in. The Fed is now saying they're going to go for three rate increases over 2022 instead of just two. We'll see some of that if that's effective. The last one too is just labor force. Labor force participation has gone down. there's a huge increase in the demand for jobs. There were roughly 12 million job openings last month, and you're still having a lot of jobs that are going unfilled. And we'll talk about the big thing with that is a stay-at-home parent, mostly female, staying at home. They can't go to work. School's closing. That's been a big issue. Some are deciding not to go. Lower wage employees realizing it's not worth it, and they're staying back. But the biggest one is baby boomers retiring early. You had about a 3.8% increase in baby boomers in 2020 who decided to retire, which was much greater than before. And a bunch of them, given the housing prices have increased, their stock portfolios have increased, they're realizing they're just going to take retirement early. So these are putting pressure on prices and wages. And we'll see this through 2022.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Good overview. Hey, Stephen, so as a representative, representing the healthcare industry, it's been a crazy year all over the board. Past crazy 2 years as well. Tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing in that industry from a labor issue, growth, those type of things. And we all obviously we have to take into account COVID without a doubt from that standpoint. So, what are you hearing from the folks that you represent?
Sure. So first of all, it's been a incredibly challenging 2 years. We're starting year 3 of an unprecedented pandemic. So I think first and foremost, the people that are coming to work every day in hospitals and health systems have been just heroic, and the kind of sacrifices, the hard work that they've done to prevent North Carolina from having the same kind of situation that we've seen in New York or New Jersey or California or elsewhere, really, was the result of, hospitals and health systems working well with the state and other stakeholders, and then people just pinning their ears back and coming to work and giving their all. I think it was mentioned by Mark that, the COVID mutations are a question going forward. I think we're pretty optimistic, actually. So first, I would say that our ability to take care of COVID patients has significantly improved over the past 2.5, 3 years. So hospitals and health systems are better suited to take care of them. They're with the new therapeutics. I think we have more confidence that we can return people home even if they've been critically ill. I think the most important thing that we can do as North Carolinians is get vaccinated and get boosted. And the science, doesn't lie in regards to, 98% of the people that are in ICUs today are unvaccinated. 98% of the people that are on ventilators are unvaccinated. And if there's one thing that we can do to protect our communities, our businesses, and each other, boy, it's get vaccinated, get boosted, wear a mask. We're pretty optimistic going into 2020. I think part of it is we've had such a tough 2 years in 20 and 21 that, we're convinced things are going to get better because we're better at doing our work. Second thing is that I think there have been some positive discoveries throughout the pandemic in regards to how to better connect with our community and intervene with patients outside the hospital. And I think that will be a continuing trend and body of work that we take on, as we think about healthcare from a consumer perspective, versus just being a place where we're at the end of the funnel and catching a patient or a family at a time of greatest need.
Well said, sir. Appreciate that. Doug, so in terms of taking a shift to biotech and life sciences, you're on the forefront of that and working with companies. What, if I may ask, so, and as a matter of fact, one of the cool things I've noticed is because we've done a couple roundtables and discussed this with a lot of companies in the area, we've been on the forefront of manufacturing help in terms of fighting COVID from that standpoint. We've done a lot of that over the past 2 years, which has been really, really kind of neat to see from the sidelines. From your industry, tell us a little bit about what we can expect or how 2021 ended up and what we can expect from your view of things.
Great. Well, the life sciences community in this state has been on fire this last year, just really we had 19 announcements of either expansions, relocations, setting up shop in North Carolina, almost $4 billion of investment and about 4,000 jobs announced. So the pandemic has actually accelerated what we were predicting was going to happen in the state because of the need for more facilities and treatments. And so we're seeing a huge influx of demand and looking at projects that we think will go into 2022. We also were very fortunate at the end of the year, the federal government, the Economic Development Agency put out a Build Back Better challenge. And there were about 530 of those sent in from across the country. And if the grant was awarded, you would get a phase one of $500,000. And if you could, then you can apply for phase two, which could be between $25 and $75 million coming into the state. And they're looking at specific projects about helping to secure, spread the wealth of employment or across the demographic sectors of the state. So we coordinated with 28 partners and put in an application, and we were one of two in North Carolina that was approved. They approved 60 overall. So that really just kind of solidifies North Carolina's ability to work together and to have partnerships across the geographies. So we're seeing that as a great opportunity for our state going into next year as well. So that will be funded. We'll be putting in phase two in March. And so we hope that we will hear by September that we were successful on that one as well. And then that will really lead to more things. But nonetheless, those projects are ongoing. And so they are focused on a couple of things that we noticed pre-pandemic. And that was, we have a demand for skilled workers in the biomanufacturing space, in the cell and gene therapy space, in the ag tech space. And we have programs that we've been working on in all those areas to corral people into those careers. We're fortunate the state has a great program through our community college system to train people in that space. Our universities are putting out between around 3,500 people a year with masters or PhDs in hard sciences. And what we need to do is convince or show those people the pathways into these jobs in life sciences, because they're really good careers and they're really good opportunities. The salaries are very, very competitive at more than double the average wage in the state. So we're seeing demand go up faster than we predicted. Already in just 2 years, we've eclipsed what we thought would happen in 5 years. And so we think that next year will be the same. Continued growth just based on the leads that we're working on right now and some of the things that Chris and his team are working with us on. We think that next year will be just, or this year, now 2022, will be just as successful as 2021.
Thomas, we talked a little bit about workforce development. As you know, every time we discuss with businesses and people like that, things that keep them up at night, they're always like finding qualified workers. You know, that is just a constant in good and bad times. Tell us a little bit about the community college system. How you fared in 2021. Gosh, it's hard to believe it went so fast. Where you see the growth coming in 2022.
Well, thank you, Ben. And you know, in 2021, while it was challenging for all of us, the North Carolina Community College system continued to be the crown jewel in economic development. As you've already heard, with the significant companies coming in North Carolina, the Toyota announcement, Apple, Google, Pratt & Whitney in Western North Carolina. The community college system in 21 trained over almost 22,000 individuals through our customized training effort, providing $9 million worth of support to businesses. Through our small business center, we grew or retained over 3,800 jobs, started up over 650 small businesses. So while we all were impacted by the continued effects of the global pandemic, the community college system continued to shine. And that's engaging directly with our economic development efforts. But we also continue to fuel the job engine. We received a historic investment from our state leaders, over $1.4 billion, which is the largest investment certainly in over a decade in our community college system from our state leaders, our legislature, and subsequently signed by the governor. And this is going to provide the resources to provide that fuel for the job engine so that we continue to be a crown jewel in our economic development efforts. We, through the governor's long leave commitment, over 10,000 high school students were able to move forward in many cases without tuition or fees. Our legislature, that was a $25 million effort. Our legislature has subsequently passed another $25 million. So we'll start with that high school student that's interested in becoming a part of our over 500,000 students that pursue either short-term workforce training to immediately enter the workforce, our 2-year associate's degrees. We're also concentrating beginning last year and continuing into 22, our adult learners. We had support from key stakeholders such as the Belk Endowment, providing a pilot program for adult learners, those individuals that are seeking that education and training to become immediately competitive. We competed in a national grant and received, we were only one of 6 states to receive funding for a specific adult learner program focusing on our diverse communities and in partnership again with the Belk Endowment. So we have over 20 community colleges participating in that. Once again, preparing that workforce for the future. I know Stephen mentioned our discussions around healthcare. We are in those discussions to see how we can partner with our healthcare partners. The community college system provides almost 47% of the nurses in the state. Not only we're partnering with Stephen's organization, but we also receive for nursing specifically with the GlaxoSmithKline Foundation, a $2 million pilot program to ensure that we're building that pipeline. So 21, while very challenging, operating within the global pandemic, our community colleges never closed. In many cases, we had to pivot to virtual learning, but we maintained on-campus presence to ensure that we were growing that educated and well-trained workforce.
And I'll tell you, it's really good to hear that. This conversation sounds a little bit different than the ones we've always had, like at the beginning of 2020 was pretty good. But when you got into the spring, these conversations got a little bit different, that's for sure. Hey, Byron, we work together quite a lot with small businesses, and I know that that you're on a day-to-day basis. The folks at the SBTDC are working constantly with small businesses, and obviously, a very, very important part of North Carolina's economy. What do you hear? What are you hearing from them about how 2021 ended up, and what are they saying about how 2022 is looking?
Thanks, Ben. I think 2021 ended very positive for most small businesses. In the last 2 years, we served over 12,000 small businesses in North Carolina. And from that, we saw the challenges, the uncertainty, but then we saw the hope and optimism toward the end of 2021. I think we saw capital influx. We saw record SBA lending, record small business lending last year, and it will be interesting to see how that goes into 2022. We saw over 16,000 jobs created and retained just in the small businesses that we served. But talking about that a little differently from some of the things Mark pointed out and how they impact the small businesses. The workforce, huge challenge for small businesses. You take a 10-employee firm and 2 people don't come back to work, that's 20% of their workforce.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the impact that makes. The supply chain, most small businesses were very dependent on very specific supply chains. They didn't have numerous supply chains, numerous suppliers to reach out to, but they overcame that. And one way they did that was reaching out for assistance with all the resources in the state. And North Carolina's got some wonderful resources to help small businesses. The SBTDC, the Small Business Center Network at the community college, and many others that have provided hours, countless hours of service to the small businesses. One thing we also saw, actually being a judge for your small business competition, was great to see some of those small businesses, the small business that had the sauce company, and were able to start finding customers a different way from the way they used to. to start finding customers by doing TikTok videos. Small businesses are nimble. They're able to be resilient. And so I'm really optimistic about how they can rebound in 2022. There'll be some hiccups in that. There'll be some challenges. I think I'm anxious to hear from Adam in a few minutes. I think there's going to be some debt issues for small businesses. Most small businesses work with their own money. They're pretty leveraged already. There's going to be some challenges. The economic development injury loans that came about were a wonderful thing, but they're loans. A lot of this stuff is going to come back to be heavy debt for some small businesses. But I still think there's some optimism there. We've seen huge growth with certain, especially the small manufacturers, like I believe Mark was talking about manufacturing. Those guys are still growing like crazy, looking to expand. So I really think there's going to be some great opportunity in 2022 for the small businesses, especially using your word, pivot, as we all have.
Well, that brings us to Adam. Adam, when last time we discussed this at the at our economic forum, you mentioned after 2020, your business and finance in general did fairly well, considering we were in the midst of a pandemic. Did that increase as we moved on to as we moved into 2021, and how are you looking coming into this year?
So. Thank you, Ben. We had a great year. The word that I wrote down on my notes and underlined was resilient, right? And I feel our business has been very resilient. The North Carolina economy has been very resilient. As Byron mentioned, small businesses around the state have been very resilient. It's kind of incredible how much we as a company were able to grow and the economy of the state was able to grow last year, given all the headwinds that we were facing. But I think everybody, a lot of these COVID-induced habits and ways of business seem to be becoming more second nature and more permanent at this point. I think that we're going to all face some continued headwinds this year. I will say there's an extraordinary amount of liquidity still in the system. A lot of that was pumped in by the Fed and the federal government a couple of years ago, and I think it's going to take a long time for it to work its way through the system. It's created a lot of growth in the financial services sector, but it's creating some imbalances too, and I think we're starting to see that in the form of inflation. I think, you know, for a short time last year, the Fed and other economists were using the word transitory, and that went away pretty quickly. I think as October and November came, and people came to the realization that, it's been a long time since our country and our economy has faced inflation. One thing that we know from the past is once that genie is out of the bottle, it's really hard to get it back in. I think the Fed just in the last 30 to 60 days has started making real efforts to try to get that genie back in the bottle sooner rather than later. And obviously that tightening of economic policy is going to impact businesses, but I feel like in 2022, the drumbeat of inflation is going to get louder, not less. And I think all of the issues that we're all experiencing, I think every single person has noted so far around the labor market being extremely tight, are going to continue as well. It is very hard to attract talent, I think, in any business right now. It's interesting. We're as a state, as a country, I think, getting more used to it. We're just kind of shrugging our shoulders at slower service, shrugging our shoulders when a business is closed for the day, and just, I guess, becoming more understanding that it's part of what we're facing in this strange environment that we live in. But I do think for our business and for North Carolina in general, North Carolina continues to be a great place to live and work. People continue to move here very, very quickly. And I think our economy will continue to flourish as a result. I think a couple of people have noted that Chris is going to speak, and I'm sure tell us about all of the great big projects in the state. I was thinking, if you look at Charlotte, Raleigh, I think Thomas mentioned Western North Carolina and Pratt and Whitney. If you look at the Carolina core and Toyota, it's really all over our state. And at the same time, we're having this small town North Carolina revival. So COVID feels bad. It will continue to feel bad. I think Ben at the top called it our old friend COVID. You need to find better friends. Not my friend. But I think it'll be with us, and I think we'll continue to be resilient. And I think our business and the small businesses in North Carolina will continue to be resilient.
Good call. Good call. He's not a friend, that's for sure.
Not mine.
Not mine. He's not mine either. I don't like. Yeah. Hey, Andy. So we've been on a couple panels together, especially for energy. You represent many municipalities around the state. Your company does, and you've seen a big change in utilities, in energy, and how things have gone over the years. And from in terms of renewables, smart grid, those things. But you've also, and being in North Carolina, we've been affected by all kinds of different things in terms of natural disasters more than other places. What did you see from your expertise in 2021, and kind of what's the progression going into this year?
Well, first off, from a general perspective, I think the electric utility industry is a good indication of what a lot of the panelists have been saying, in that we have been seeing a lot of good positive load growth. That has upticked in the last couple years, especially in 2021. I think the departure of a lot of the manufacturing from North Carolina's traditional industries is more or less behind us, and we're seeing a lot of new and different sorts of electric customers come to our cities. Adam kind of gave me a great segue there, because I represent municipal utilities both near major metropolitan areas as well as standalone cities and even rural communities, and we see that growth across the board amongst our members. The types of industries that we're seeing come into the state are transportation and logistics. We're seeing some manufacturing in many different areas. A lot of our coastal communities, for instance, see boat builders coming in. That's really interesting. We're seeing high-tech companies, traditional high-tech companies come in, but also data centers. Again, from an electric utility provider perspective, that's a lot of load that we have to handle. And then finally, we're seeing a lot of interest from crypto miners, which may or may not directly impact economic activity, but it is an interesting sign, because crypto miners come to the state because of affordable electricity prices. So that is very interesting. It's a source of a lot of load growth for us. Seeing kind of the leads and the projects that we have coming up here in 2022, I don't think things are going to slow down too much in 2022. So that's been very positive. Kind of hitting on some of the other announcements. The Toyota project was very interesting in that it's a battery manufacturer, so that's the sort of load that we're seeing grow on our systems. We're seeing Amazon and other logistics providers announce that they're going to convert their fleets to batteries, and that's going to result in a lot of load growth. I will say, though, the load growth that I've referenced to this point is not necessarily due to that electrification yet. That's a little bit into the future.
It's great to hear. Thank you. Chris, so everybody's been talking about it. Obviously, you have been keeping us at Business North Carolina very busy with the press releases that have been coming out across the state about job announcements and all kinds of new things popping up across the state in terms of economic development stuff. It's been great to read, believe me, and such. And you've kept us guessing too. You guys scrambling, and Tony as well. We'll talk about this too from the economic development perspective. It seemed like it was booming in 2021. I mean, obviously, Apple, Toyota, big names coming here as well, and some other names that most people may not know about. That kind of didn't have the brand name recognition, but probably are in many ways just as significant. Tell us a little bit about what was going down in 2021 and what you got planned coming up. I know there's some things that hopefully we'll be hearing about pretty soon.
Sure. Well, first off, Happy New Year, Ben. Thanks for allowing me to be part of the panel with everyone else, and good to see a lot of friendly faces here. I mean, I think the stat that tells it for 2021 on the economic development front is what the governor and Secretary Sanders have been out there talking about for at least the past week, which was 23,700 announced new jobs and north of $10 billion in new capital investment announced as a result of corporate recruitment and expansion projects throughout the state. And those are really just the ones that are assisted by the state in some form or fashion, incentives, of course, being one common way that assistance is provided. Those totals do not reflect things like Google's decision to locate. Google did that independent of state assistance. Fidelity's expansion this past year, also independent of state assistance of any kind. So those totals aren't even reflected in that record-breaking 23,700 announced new jobs. And remember, that is very much an effort across an entire team of partners. We're very fortunate and honored to be one of those partners, but a lot of the folks here on this line, Biotech Center, Community College System, our state utility partners, SBTDC, I mean, a lot of these groups are instrumental in these types of results that the state can claim every year. So that, I think, was a good summation of 2021. But when you dig deeper, what you see is that a lot of our activity ever since about June of 2020 has been heavily skewed on industrial development. We are not seeing, notwithstanding a couple big announcements, you know, Tony was personally involved in the recruitment of Centene down in Charlotte last year, or 2020, Apple, of course, notwithstanding some of those mega office projects. The vast majority of what we've seen for the past 18 months has been heavily skewed towards manufacturing, fulfillment, food processing, these types of sectors. I think if we turn our attention towards 2022, those are the things that we're looking out for, that we're a little bit, I want to say, concerned about, but we'd love to see it get back to what we saw pre-pandemic, specifically demand for office projects. So corporate headquarter relocations, which have long been something North Carolina excelled at, as companies look to flee New Jersey, New York, Illinois, California. Charlotte and Raleigh especially were very attractive for those types of end users. I think while we're in this limbo of employers trying to navigate what's the workplace of the future look like, are people going to work from home permanently? Is it a hybrid? It really doesn't make a lot of sense for these companies to uproot and leave their current headquarters to go somewhere else. So until that settles, I think that explains one part of why we just haven't seen a lot of demand there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Tony, you're in a really unique position in terms of where you are, because you saw a lot of these economic development projects in fruition, or not in fruition, but kind of growing them, the seeds and things like that, and in the pipeline. And now you've seen a couple of them come to fruition. And in your position now at Brooks Pierce as the economic development guru, tell me a little bit about what it's like to kind of seen some of these projects as they've grown along and where they are now, and kind of what you're seeing from your standpoint, very unique standpoint, moving forward in 2021.
Well, it's exciting. I'm sort of returning to where I was before I became a bureaucrat. And now, no, you know, we've been on this trajectory since 2006 in many ways. I think what we're seeing a total evolution of our economy, from tobacco and textiles and those. While the manufacturing is different manufacturing. It's a different type of manufacturing. It's fewer employees and much more capital investment. But what I want to talk about is basically North Carolina, March 27th, 2020, Governor Cooper issued the stay-at-home order. That was like right when the pandemic, we're in a very different place today. And I think most of us would admit that we're going to learn to live with this, or live through it, or survive it and keep the economy. One of the debates we had was we did not shut down construction. We had limited restrictions on manufacturing, which made us very different from other states. So while we may be having some supply chain problems, nothing like states like Michigan and others who shut down manufacturing. One of the reasons, like Freightliner, for example, was having a problem. They couldn't get parts out of Michigan because manufacturing was shut down. But during that time, we saw a K curve. We were having as many as 54,000 unemployment claims a day on a system designed to do 3,000 a week. But it was basically people below the $30,000. It was stay-at-home moms. It was the hospitality industry. They were disparately affected. At the same time, we had we set a record that year for capital investment and job growth. At the same time, we paid out $12 billion in unemployment compensation. And I've heard people say we're awash in cash, and we are. I think, we've seen stimulus packages coming out during the Trump administration, during Biden's administration. And I think our companies still have access to this money. And our economy here in North Carolina did not falter by and large. But some of the things that's happened with the employment on the K curve, we've seen Amazon and Walmart enter this, and the wage differential has changed dramatically at the bottom end of it. When Amazon advertises for 125,000 employees, it's sometimes way above what typical industries are paying. It has changed that dynamic. But going back to Thomas and the community colleges, what's keeping us afloat is the education infrastructure and the workforce infrastructure that we have. We have approximately about 600,000 people employed in private and public universities and community colleges on any given day. Employers are not going anywhere where they don't have a workforce. So even in spite of the pandemic, and even with labor shortages, we're better off than many places. Financial services is now one of our leading industries in the state. The fifth largest bank in the country, in the world, I was meeting with not so long ago, and they said, you have to look at North Carolina now if you're going to do an expansion, just because of the type of workforce that we have here. But I think we're on fire. Our client base is on fire. It's very exciting. Chris and his team are doing a great job. The legislature, we've created a situation where we have a great education system that's educated employees. We're also putting in infrastructure that we need for companies to come, and taxes and incentives. We're watching the corporate income tax disappear. So the optics of that, I think, are not going unnoticed in the corporate world.